I will take it out from under you as you name me your successor from your knees, 'cause your people want it in your head. Bam. Right out of the gate. Who talks like that?
Context is rather crucial. That line, likely uttered under duress or extreme political maneuvering in Rosaria Munda's Flamefall, encapsulates the brutal power dynamics at play. It's not just shouting.
Oh, here we go. Defender of the dramatically overwritten. Look, listeners, the book is Flamefall. Dragons, teenagers running a country into the ground, and apparently people threatening each other while demanding knee-based coronations. Sounds like my last family reunion.
It's the second book in the Aurelian cycle. They overthrew the old tyrants only to discover, shocker, that governing is fractionally more complex than riding a fire-breathing lizard. And your cousin asking for the gravy boat is hardly comparable to political assassination threats.
My cousin Brenda is a political assassin, you just don't know her. Anyway, the big deal here is the heroes from book 1. Yeah, they hate each other now. Annie, the new boss lady, is basically telling people to eat cake or maybe just less bread. If you're poor iron-class scum.
That's a gross oversimplification. Firstrider Anastasia, or Annie, is grappling with the impossible choices of leadership during famine and unrest. She's rationing, yes, but the alternative is mass starvation. It's utilitarian ethics, under extreme pressure.
Utilitarian's mutilitarian. She's firing on hungry people. Meanwhile, Leet Prince Preboy von Trader, who helped set up this mess, decides he doesn't like the new management either and joins the radicals. You know what the internet calls him? Leaser bitchmade. That's not me. That's a direct quote from a reviewer, Gold.
While the nomenclature is colorful, Lee's motivations are arguably rooted in trauma and disillusionment. He witnessed the flaws of the old regime, participated in its overthrow, and now sees the new republic, Callipolis, repeating history with its rigid gold-silver and iron caste system. He feels betrayed by Atreus, the figurehead he initially supported after the events of Book 1 involving his cousin Julia.
Boo-hoo. He killed his cousin. He sided with the guy who immediately screwed him over. Now he's teaming up with Megara, the genius who thought Sayer to the food was a good protest strategy. That's not trauma. That's terminal stupidity. I bet he cries himself to sleep clutching one of his family's precious tapestries they lost. Someone actually mentioned tapestries.
The tapestry mention was likely metaphorical, representing lost heritage and status, and while Megara's actions were catastrophically counterproductive, Lee aligning with her signifies his desperation and rejection of Annie's perceived authoritarianism. Annie, meanwhile, is being called frustrating, submissive, and possibly changing for the worst by readers who expected a flawless heroine.
She is frustrating. She's like the hall monitor lecturing you about gum while the chemistry lab explodes. And Lee's just the emo kid who set the fire complaining the fire trucks are too loud. I swear. The only characters I didn't want to throttle were maybe the Griff, poor schmuck stuck riding dragons for the other bad guys, and maybe Power.
Ah, Power. An interesting case. An unapologetically privileged Gold who, surprisingly, remains loyal to Annie when Lee defects. Reviewers seem baffled, calling him the dumbest, jerkiest sweetheart. It challenges reader expectations.
Because he's honest. He's an entitled jerk and he knows it. Unlike Lee, who pretends his temper tantrums are some noble cause. And Griff? Yeah, okay. Oh, the guy with the dragon named Sparker is fine. Probably because he's too busy trying not to get tortured by the exiled psychos and new Pythos to whine about the rationing schedule. There's a rumor he's got a thing going with Dello, Lee's other cousin. A limp wrist romance. One reviewer delicately put it.
Let's perhaps avoid quoting the more problematic reviewer terminology. Griff's perspective does provide crucial insight into the exiled Dragonlords, adding another layer to the conflict's complexity. But the core tension remains, is Annie a necessary pragmatist turning hard, or is Lee a righteous rebel fighting a new tyranny?
Okay. Is this book actually any good? Segment. People are losing their minds. One reviewer. This was a big mistake. I should have Wertley dying. Another, I stared in the abyss for 10 minutes straight. Someone else. I cried on the subway. The subway. Public transport weeping over fictional dragon politics.
The emotional investment speaks to the narrative's power. The cliffhanger ending is notoriously effective, apparently involving a potential character return and leaving the central conflicts brutally unresolved. It forces readers to confront the moral ambiguity.
Ambiguity. It's annoying. 70% of the plurally not talking to each other. If they had one decent phone call, or carrier pigeon, whatever they use, half the dying could be avoided. It's like watching those sitcoms where one overheard sentence ruins everything.
It's a deliberate choice, arguably showcasing how ideology, trauma, and miscommunication fuel conflict even between people who once cared for each other. It reflects real-world political breakdowns, though I concede its execution can feel protracted.
Protracted. It's infuriating. One reviewer called the book, sure, I get it. It's 500 pages of teenagers making terrible decisions with global consequences. If Lee were a sandwich, he'd be a soggy white bread sandwich with nothing but mayonnaise and self-pity.
And
Annie is whole wheat, maybe, but dry. Very dry, and judging you for wanting butter. Power is that surprisingly good gas station panini you feel guilty about liking.
this culinary analogy is not helping. The book tackles serious themes: the cyclical nature of power, the cost of revolution, systemic inequality.
Yeah, it's Animal Farm with dragons and more yelling. Okay, final verdict, wrap up, rating time. You first, give it your fancy score.
Despite the sometimes frustrating character dynamics and reliance on miscommunication, the political depth and the sheer audacity of the moral questions raised are compelling. I give Flamefall 3.5 out of 5 unresolved constitutional crises.
Weak? Predictable. Like Lee's next bad decision. I give it 6 out of 7 burning granaries. It made me angry. It made me yell. People cried on public transport. That's entertainment, baby. Forget nuance.
Why do I even bother?
All right, you literary lunatics. That's all the time we have for Flamefall. Tune in next week when we tackle, Gary the Sentient Dorknob Finds Love. Sounds riveting. This has been Heartbook Radio.
Please read responsibly.